Good evening, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order of the Moorhead City Council. Today's date, July 27th, 2020, and the time is 5:31 p.m. Madam City Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Shelley Dahlquist.
Here.
Sarah Watson-Curry.
Here.
Shelley Carlson.
Here.
Heidi Durand. Deb White.
Here.
Larry Seljevold.
Here.
Chuck Hendrickson.
Here.
Steve Lindas.
Here.
In chambers, I have Acting City Manager Dan Molly, and on the phone is City Attorney John Shockley, and then Mayor Jonathan Judd.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If we can all please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I am Mayor Jonathan Judd. The Moorhead City Council is holding its regularly scheduled meeting using virtual meeting technology under an emergency declaration due to COVID-19. I am in the City Council chambers, along with the Acting City Manager, the City Clerk, and there is two other staff members here who will also be attending here physically. Other council members are attending remotely. Any public comment received prior to this meeting will be read as a part of the record during the applicable agenda item. The public may participate during the meeting by calling 218-299-5001. Public input will be taken by a staff member and provided to me to read during the meeting. Or you may request that your call be bridged to the virtual WebEx meeting and speak directly during our public hearings or citizens addressing the council agenda item. Again, the public comment line is 218-299-5001. If there's not an answer, please leave your message or callback number and someone will reach you as soon as possible. All right, everyone. Item number 3, agenda amendments. Are there any amendments to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 4, the consent agenda. And my understanding is that there is one item that will be pulled off consent this evening.
Yes, Mayor. Item number 11 has been requested to be pulled off consent.
Item number 11. Other than that, are there any items that are going to be pulled off the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Linda moves to approve.
White seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Madam City Clerk.
Dahlquist.
Yes.
Watson-Curry.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Seljevold.
Aye.
Hendrickson.
Aye.
Lindas.
Yes.
Motion passes. We'll move on to item number 5, recognitions, presentations. 5A, Moorhead Compost Site Fire Update by Mr. Steve Moore.
Do I remove this for clarity?
I would. I'm just
Okay.
putting it back on when I'm not speaking. You should be fine.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Just to be, can they see the slides from where they're at? Okay, all right. There's a lot of slides, but don't fret. There are a lot of pictures just to kind of outline what we had going. So as you know, the 17th of July, we had a fire at the compost site. We believe it started by the wood chip pile spontaneously combusting. And I'll kind of walk you through what we've been going through since the 17th. It's been a lot of activity. This photo here is the photo was taken by a drone in 2020. And that main pile of wood there is about 3.5 acres. I estimate about 169,000 cubic yards of wood waste. The part at the top is the compost site where all the, grassy area at the top center is the year one compost pile. The main grass pile is off to the top left. So that's what it looked like before the 17th. After the 17th, next slide, please. Well, the fire started actually when I was driving home at 4:30. I noticed it. And then by the time I turned around, the police were on site and the fire department was there and established incident command. They did a great job. I'd like to thank the fire department for their work and professionalism. I met the IC out at the site, and we decided at that point that there was no sense in trying to extinguish the fire because it was within the first 45 minutes. It was way more than anybody could handle without a hydrant system out at that site. Next slide. Sorry about that, I don't know why it's not working. And this is just a picture, that was about at the 45-minute point, 1 hour point. You can see the photo off to the left, or the part off to the left is the wood chip pile, which is now ignited because of the intense heat of the main wood chip pile. Next slide. This is an aerial photo that was taken, a drone picture on Saturday, and you can see the entire, that white area is all 3.5 acres of wood waste that was basically turned to ash. The big smoking pile at the bottom right is the wood chip pile, and then those piles to the left of the compost were also ignite on fire because of the heat. Next slide. This is an infrared image of the same drone photo, and those red areas at the time were 500 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the wood chip pile was probably in excess of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit after it really got going. Next slide. This is just a ground photo. Looked like the surface of the moon on Saturday morning. That was a lot of ash and a lot of large wood that was still not burned. Next slide. We had to establish an action plan, so on Saturday I discussed with the incident command what we were going to do, and basically, as you could see in the thermal image, it was hot enough we needed to leave that main wood pile alone and let it cool before we started moving it. And then once it cooled, we hired a contractor to bring 2 dozers out and spend 2 days out there pushing all that debris into a pile, and while it continued to burn. And then we started turning and working the year one compost pile, because when compost and grass is burning and wood chips are burning, they burn from the inside, and there's no way you can dump as much water on the outside, but it'll continue to burn because you just can't get the water to penetrate that pile because it's so dense. Then we installed culverts and grain fans to get the wood chip pile to burn hotter. And why did we do that? Well, it's because we couldn't put it out. So the hotter it burns, the less smoke it generated. Still generated a lot of smoke, but it would have been a lot worse had we started dumping a bunch of water on it trying to put it out. And then long range, we need to purchase that air curtain wood burner so we can stay on top of our wood waste and not get to 3.5 acres worth of wood waste. Next slide, please. And so that's the wood chip pile to your left, the grass pile. We tried to extinguish it, that didn't work. Next slide. Year one compost pile, the size of that pile. So we decided that we could load it and spread it out and then water it down, and that worked really well. Next slide. These are from Monday. And then just a picture of 4 loaders working at the same time. There's a 5th one out there as well. Next slide. Tuesday, this is another drone photo. You can see we made it halfway through that year one compost pile. Where that loader is to the left, that's how far it was out. So we had worked it out, put it into windrows and watered it down, and then ran the Scarab machine across it to turn it over. Next slide. Thursday, we started making good progress. About 60% complete with that pile. Next slide. Next slide. And that's the picture of the scarab turning it. Next slide. Yep. And that's what it looked like Friday morning. So all that compost had been windrowed, extinguished, and moved around, and starting and finalizing that process. The big pile out to the left side of that picture is the current grass pile, and you can see the loaders moving it over to another pile and turning it over, and then that water truck is spraying it down. Next slide. So this is a week later, and we've been working on it for 10 to 12 hours a day. So the wood waste area, by Thursday, we had the dozers push into that circular area. Next slide. And then there's them working. Next slide. So it was all still smoldering and hot, and we had these 2 dozers pushing all of this stuff across the wood waste site. That's Thursday. Next slide. And almost done. Next slide. And then that's Friday. That's an aerial photo. So you can see all that is now dirt. All the wood waste is gone except for some ridging. Those 2 ridges there on the top of the photo is all that remains of that 3.5 acres of wood waste. Next slide. Tuesday, this is the problem child. That's how big that the wood chip pile was. You can see the culverts feeding there, and the fans are at the end of those, and you can see the flames coming up. If we didn't do that, all this thing would have done was smoldered the entire time, and it'd still be probably 90% of its original size. Next slide. So Thursday, we're still running it, and it's starting to move, and we were able to push some of it back as it burned, as it cooled down, but that area where it's actually inside of that, it's extremely hot, and when you turn it too much, it was getting too hot for the equipment, so we had to stop. Next slide. Next slide. Just different angles of that wood chip pile. And then Friday, we really started seeing a reduction in the size of that wood chip pile. Next slide. And that's an aerial. You can see it off the bottom right is all that's left. Probably 75% of that wood chip pile is gone. And now we're just seeing mild smoldering. And it's going to continue that way for the next several weeks until it stops. So next slide. But the impact should be minimum. That's the grass pile. That's how big when we bring all the grass in. Next slide. And that's just a close-up of showing how it smokes from the inside. You don't see any flames on the outside. All that heat is generated inside the pile. Next slide. And that's our loaders moving it from one pile, turning it over. Next slide, and then the water truck spraying it down. So we did that and finished those operations on Sunday. Next slide. And so that's really a recap. So we've been working, pretty much nonstop since the event on the 17th. And how do we keep this from why did this happen? Well, because we ran out of real estate, 3 years worth of wood waste. And then our wood chips kept piling up because I had no place to put the wood chips. And so when they are piled too high, left alone, they generate heat and then combust. So our plan that we've been working for 3 years is to purchase this firebox air burner, and it requires a Title V air permit. We've completed that application process, or we've completed the application, submitted it to the PCA on the 10th of June, and it's going to be a 6 to 9 month process to get it approved. And we're including this funding amount in our 2021 budget because my plan is to purchase it right after the start of the year in 2021. By the time we get it delivered from the company, we'll have the PCA permit and we can start firing it up and start processing wood waste through that air burner. The advantage of this is it uses a curtain of air to help reduce and minimize the amount of smoke. And if we stay on top of the wood waste, we won't have that big pile out there waiting to ignite. So I think that builds, but you can just go to the end. Yep, and that's all I have. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to your staff for their efforts to control it, and also for the fire department as well, and their staff for helping out to assist. I don't see the chat box up or any, can we get that up so I can see the hands, if there's any hands up? Just a second, folks, if you got your hands up, I just need the, there we go. All right, I see 3. We'll go with Councilmember Lindos, then White, then Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mayor Judd. And I echo thanks, Mr. Moore and the fire department for addressing this. Growing up in the Pacific Northwest, I remember fires at wood plants, and basically too much wood equals combustion. And so it's not a good situation, but it is a situation we have. So I have 2 questions. One, do we have personal protection equipment for people that need it, that might be bothered by smoke, especially the workers out there? And I'll ask the second one after the answer to this one.
The PPE for my workers out there?
Yeah.
Is that the question? Yeah, we, fire department was out there. We don't have any self-contained SCBAs or anything like that for my guys. One of my heavy equipment operators is a volunteer firefighter, so when he was out there on Saturday, he was wearing his bunker gear in the payloader. But to answer your question, you know, we're really not trained and equipped to handle this type of situation, but with under the guidance of the fire department, you know, the incident commander was out there. Chad Stanglin, our emergency manager, spent a lot of, I think he was up for, I don't know, maybe 36 hours plus, making sure that we were doing everything correctly. So, yeah, we're not equipped to do this, but we kept, we always had somebody on safety watch watching the operators. So okay. they could see the angles, you know, and then we could pull our equipment operators back if they got too far into the pile or too close. So we always had a safety monitor there.
Excellent. The other question was just something that occurred to me while you were talking about having too much wood chips, and that has to do with, as a homeowner, I put you know, libs out to get chipped. Is there an ability, if I wanted to just say chip it and then leave it at my house so that you wouldn't have to deal with it? Is that something that we could actually do in the city, or is that kind of difficult with the equipment?
It would be difficult because the way our chipper works is that it shoots it right in the back of the truck. Okay. So it'd be, yeah, I'm not sure how we would, but I like the idea because and then you can let people repurpose those right, like on site, but with the equipment that we have, and I'm not sure how you do it because those chippers are really messy. And so just discharging it right on the curb line would be kind of rough, but we were giving away as much of the wood chips. We were making actually good progress giving away a lot of the wood chips, but if it's more than 60 days out in the elements, then the moisture content really gets high, and then it just really doesn't become very usable. There's a couple of there's in your, I don't know if it was in your packet, but I'll send it out. I took a picture on Thursday of last week just to show how much wood and wood chips we brought in a 4-day period while we were dealing with the compost site. And and that was just brought in by my staff because we had closed the compost site to the public and to contractors. So just us doing our curbside service and Dutch elm disease removal, we brought in, I mean, it's amazing how quickly it accumulates. So if I could get this wood burner in any faster and get the permit done any faster, that would be in our best interest because we'll have a lot to catch up with by the time we get it going.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I was actually looking for wood chippers, you know, just to figure out how I could wood chip my own stuff, and I didn't have an answer. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Councilmember White?
Thank you, Mayor. And Mr. Moore, thank you again as you know, as I'll just repeat what others said, that to you, your crew, to our crew at the fire department for the hard work that you're doing on this, and for a reminder of just why it's important that we come up with a better solution, especially with emerald ash borer breathing down our necks, that we know that this problem is just going to become even worse. My question is related to what Councilmember Lindas brought up, that, you know, we know that we're going to have this continuing to smolder for a couple of weeks. So even for the folks, you'll probably see this, we were all contacted by someone who raised some concerns, not about people that are necessarily working on the fire, but are working in the vicinity that are adversely affected by that. And so are we talking about plans for some of our city workers who are in that area, but may not be able to be safely in their in that work environment while the fire continues?
Yes, unfortunately, our wastewater treatment plant is located in very close proximity to the compost site. I cannot speak to that, as Bob owns that operation, the city engineer. But I can speak from a perspective of us handling the compost site. There isn't, we can't, there's nothing more I can do to reduce the amount of smoke coming out of that wood chip pile. So I don't know the answer on how it can be addressed to make things easier, better at the wastewater treatment plant. So I can't answer that right now.
Yeah, maybe that's a better question, better directed to our city manager, or just let's explore that to see what we are doing to make sure that those workers are safe as well.
Yes, Councilmember White, we heard about that through our HR department today, quite a bit, frankly, and I see there was an email that came through as well, so we'll be looking at that in the morning and following up.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember White. Councilmember Watson Curry, and then Councilmember Hendrickson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful that there was nobody injured in this whole ordeal too. Most of my questions were addressed. I guess I did want to just know if the compost site is open to the general public, and then maybe two, if I don't know the last time that we had we've updated any sort of press release on the status, just so people know we know it's still smoking and here's why. A recap of some of the things shared here would be really helpful for the general public. So it's not a fear that something new is started, but that it is being monitored and safe. So, thank you.
The answer to your first question is yes, the compost site was open to the public this morning. I did a news release on Friday afternoon stating that we were going to be closed through Saturday, so our Saturday morning hours were not open, but we were to reopen at 8 o'clock in the morning this morning. So yes, we're open. And then, we can work some sort of update press release on where we're at, and that, yes, there'll be still some continued odor from the wood chips that are going to continue to smolder. So we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hendrickson, and then Councilmember Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, good job. Fire department, good job out there. We could smell it all the way down south here. It was, we had to close our windows because the smoke got pretty intense. So just a couple of questions I have for you. Where are we at the permit process right now? I know you submitted it, but how long does that usually take? What's the time frame in that?
They said 6 to 9 months, but then they also put a caveat that due to COVID-19, things may be taking longer, but it's they didn't give me any hard and fast estimate. So the good news is they did acknowledge that they received it, and their initial review says everything's in order and we've prepared everything properly. So that's half the battle. So we didn't have to answer any questions in the initial process. So it is currently under review, but 6 to 9 months is probably the best estimate.
Okay, thank you for that. And talking about a case for that firebox air burner, this is the case. This could probably been prevented if we had this. So thanks for being proactive on this. I want to thank your department and the fire department for the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carlson, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councilmember Hendrickson that I think that this really illuminates the need for that firebox, and I know that there might be a little sticker shock in regards to how much it costs, but I think it really demonstrates the need for it. Director Moore, you had mentioned that one of the workers out there is a volunteer fireman and had equipment that he could use. So I'm just wondering, I know Chief Dyson is on the line or on the Zoom call. is it possible for that equipment to be shared with the workers, or are there possibly OSHA guidelines that would prevent something like that from occurring? Chief Dyson, if you would be able to respond. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Carlson. They do have to have fit testing that's OSHA required, as well as particular training to use each specific kind of equipment. So we couldn't loan that equipment out. We just don't have an extra face piece to put them through that fit training. It's maybe a thought if we had this again in the future, but hopefully that firebox will take care of it.
Okay, thank you, Chief Dyson.
You have anything else to add, Mr. Moore, at all?
No.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Okay, great. Thank you again, Mr. Moore, for your staff and for all that you're doing, so really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to, I didn't do enough plugging my guys. You know, they worked really hard. It was really dangerous work, but they were very committed and work on long hours and great attitudes. So I'm really proud of them. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, folks, we'll move on to 5B, Moorhead's Coronavirus Relief Funding CARES Act update. And we'll be with tag team between Mr. LaPointe and Mr. Molly.
Yes, hey, maybe I can introduce it quickly. We have Derek LaPointe and Lisa Bodie on the line to talk about it. Maybe I'll introduce Lisa first to talk about municipal needs, and then Derek LaPointe to talk about what we're talking about, what we're hoping to accomplish by way of partnerships in the community. You know, basically what's happening here is a few weeks ago, the city of Moorhead received about $3.2 million in state allocated CARES Act funding to address the coronavirus pandemic from the U.S. Treasury. The funds are intended, these funds specifically are intended to meet public health needs and economic support from businesses, employers, community groups that have experienced interruptions due to COVID-19. So with that, we've had a group that's done a lot of really incredible work since receiving those funds, meeting about twice a week. And we're here to talk about the plan for communication with the public, some engagement, and coming back with a recommendation early in August. Lisa will get into this certainly, but we're on a very short timeline here, and look forward to all of us working together to get this funding, important funding, out into the community. So with that, Lisa, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Molly, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Cities across Minnesota and the United States are having discussions on programming funds from the CARES Act, which stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security. And as Dan mentioned, we are under a tight timeline, and there are some pretty involved instructions on what is eligible and not eligible, and we do have a tremendous team put together that really reviewed very carefully the eligibility of each activity, and we also looked at what some of our sister cities are doing with their CARES funding and trying to be creative and make the money stretch as far as it can. The funds that are not obligated by November 15th are forfeited to Clay County, and then if not programmed by Clay County, they revert back to the U.S. Treasury if not obligated by the 30th of December of this year. So we're being very careful with these funds. I'll also note that in addition to the CARES funds that were allocated by the state of Minnesota, the city of Moorhead received CARES funding through the U.S. Department of Transportation, specifically for MAP Bus, and from the Federal Aviation Administration for the Moorhead Municipal Airport, and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for community development needs. So the response from the federal government, and in some cases too, the state government have been wide ranging. And so we've really tried to take the state allocated CARES funding to address some of the needs that we consider to be the most urgent and glaring. And then, as Dan also mentioned, doing some citizen participation so that we can hear whether the public agrees with the assessment that staff has done. So we will, following our presentation to the council and some direction from you, is that we will have opportunities for community engagement beginning tomorrow, and for a week period of time. Staff has been working on a survey for the public to share their input so that their comments are well directed, and we can maybe make some inferences about the data. But I'll go just briefly through what the municipal COVID expenses are, and then talk just a little bit about some of those other federal allocations. But I won't touch on the business because that's really an area where Derek LaPointe has been, really investing a lot of time, and he's much better equipped to speak to that than I am. But one other resource, an important resource that the city of Moorhead has for responding to the pandemic is FEMA disaster funds. And for those eligible expenses, FEMA pays 70%. So that makes this CARES Act funding go a little bit further, because we are a lot further, because we only have to pay 25% of that fund, those expenses. We also have unemployment expenses that have been incurred by the city, and we have a strong indication of what we project toward during the eligibility period. One thing that the FEMA funds don't cover are the expenses that we've incurred for the quick switch to telework and the support resources needed to get everybody up and running at remote workstations. And those have, were incurred largely in that March period, but also as people have been working remotely longer, there have been some additional expenses incurred to that. And as part of that too, we have been working with Moorhead Public Service on their telework expenses as well. We have a number of facility supplies, maintenance, cleaning, and improvements to prevent COVID-19 transmission. We've reviewed some of those, we've reviewed all of those items to ensure that they meet the spirit and intent of the Treasury guidance, the frequently asked questions, as well as the act itself. And so that's another area of municipal operations. Then election support, not just general election costs, but the costs that are specific to improving the conditions and special expenses related to the COVID precautions that we will take at election sites. Also, eligible public safety and health employee expenses. Some cities are putting most of their resources in this area, and we've decided to put some of our resources in this area, but also leave a lot, as much as we can, for the business support. And then some costs related to public improvements. So those bullets constitute about $1.278 million in expenditures. And the remaining $2 million of the state allocated CARES funding is projected or proposed to be put toward the small business and community nonprofit organizational support. But before I switch it over to Derek so that we aren't going back and forth, I'll just say that the mass transit CARES funding amounted to $2.5 million. And Lori Van Beek, our transit manager, gave you a presentation on that in June. Some of the major items that are included in the mass transit CARES plan are fee waivers, no fares through December 31st of 2020, personal protective equipment and extra cleaning at mass transit facilities and on the buses. They redirected some of the buses that were underutilized to meal and grocery delivery for seniors and others in need. And that we can also use that money. That does not have the time sensitivity to it. So we can also use that money for future local share of operating expenses, which will cover Moorhead, Dilworth, and higher education partners, some of that expense that gets passed on to our partners and paid by the city taxpayers for projected as much as 3 to 4 years worth of local share, which will save the general fund some money during that time period. That will be very helpful. The community development block grant CARES funding is $157,000. Again, no immediate expenditure deadline on that one. But we have looked at we have a comment period underway right now for a block grant amendment that will be coming forward to the city council, where we've proposed splitting that money between rental assistance for income eligible households and food assistance and cleaning supplies for Churches United for the homeless. And so putting that entire $157,000 toward those expenses. There are also some other rental assistance resources being made available for the state of Minnesota, or through the state of Minnesota, and we have confirmed that Clay County Housing and Redevelopment Authority has an application pending to take advantage of that resource and make sure, and try to bring that resource to Moorhead, and is partnering with Moorhead Public Housing Agency too for any overflow on that, so that we're making sure that we best utilize any state resources that come our way. So that's how we would propose spending the community development block grant resources. But of course, the mayor and council will have opportunity to confirm that, and that we'll hear more from the public on that resource as well. And then a smaller grant, but nonetheless important, to the municipal airport. They received a CARES funding allocation of $30,000. which can be used within the regular systems for additional utility maintenance or other activity expenses. So that's some of the resources that will be made available to the community, in addition to some of the things that have gone directly to individuals, like the stimulus payments and the additional unemployment payments. So there's a lot to unpack here, and maybe the best thing would be for Derek to go into his presentation, and then when Dan concludes his remarks, if there are any questions for me at that time, maybe we could answer whatever questions you might have. So with that, I would suggest turning it over to Mr. LaPointe.
Thanks, Lisa, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as Dan mentioned, there's been a lot of work done on this, just trying to lay the groundwork out because of how quickly this program and the timelines from the federal guidelines really put stress on the city and also on the business owners. These grants that we're talking about, looking at distributing funds to community nonprofit organizations as well as small businesses. We really looked at modeling after the state of Minnesota's most recent grant program, the Small Business Economic Relief Grant. These were grants up to $10,000 for small businesses under 50 employees. The only ineligible, they had some ineligible expenses or ineligible businesses for it, mainly those that received the EIDL, Small Business Administration's EIDL advance loan, and then had some home stipulations as well. The guidelines for that grant was all approved through the legislative special session. What we look to do is really building upon that grant and then hearing from the business community that we heard many comments on that grant. One being that many of our businesses weren't eligible to apply for that state grant because of their residency requirement. As you know, being a border community, we have many business owners that may live in North Dakota and have a primary business here in Moorhead, or a secondary business in Moorhead that are paying taxes. They were deemed ineligible to apply for that grant. Other shortfalls with that grant program, I'll just note that there was $31 million set aside for Greater Minnesota. There was another 31 set aside for the metro area. There was 30,000 applicants for this grant program. Only 6,000 grants will be administered. So huge demand for the grants. Not many businesses are able to obtain it. The latest numbers we heard too were about 267 businesses were primarily selected for that first round of the lottery system. That's for the entire West Central region, so a very large region. So we know that there's many Moorhead businesses that are struggling and would benefit from these grants. Again, tried to model after many of the programs that we've seen across the state and federal guidelines. Looking at that business threshold, we're looking at supporting a grant for those businesses that employ under 20 full-time equivalent employees. They would be eligible for potential grant up to $10,000. And then looking at sole proprietors and independent contractors, those individuals have really been hit hard, haven't been a whole lot of care for them and resources available to them. Looking at grants up to $3,000 for those individuals. We also included, and we thought it was important because of the great work that these organizations do in our community, to include some nonprofit and community organizations, specifically 501c3s and 501c19s. C3s are pretty generalized in a lot of sense. For those that don't know what C19s are, they're veteran-owned businesses. And through a lot of the research, these types of organizations, specific nonprofits, were the only classes of nonprofits that were eligible for federal and state resources throughout the entire process of COVID so far. It gets really kind of complicated with the other nonprofit organizations. And I'll just say too, I know there was a lot of push for C6 organizations to receive state, federal funds. Downtown Moorhead Inc. is a C6 as well. Same with Chamber of Commerce and Moorhead Business Association, et cetera. We felt very strongly that our organizations exist because businesses exist. So getting that money to the businesses' hands and really supporting them to in turn support us was very, very much important and very much a priority in looking at this. We also looked at potentially setting aside dollars and funds out of that $2 million for minority, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses. And that's something that we modeled off of the state as well. It can be something up for discussion. And another point that I know a couple have reached out and asked the question too is specifically those businesses that have been open for less than 12 months. So think Swing Barrel, think River Haven. These businesses that didn't choose to open during COVID, but COVID happened to happen while they were planning to open. They did not qualify for many of the federal and state resources because of the requirement of being open for 12 months or longer. We looked at this program to include those businesses, knowing that they're probably some of the ones that are struggling the most out of this entire process. So there's a lot of conversation with this program. We know there's still a lot more work to be done. We're starting to see programs come out across the state as other communities are facing the same challenges that we are. I've done a lot of research looking at other communities and other cities that are doing this. Many are modeling after the Department of Employment and Economic Development, Minnesota DEEDS grant program, just similar to what we're doing, because of how quickly these funds need to be allocated to the businesses and ultimately spent. So it's not common. I don't think we're reaching in a lot of sense, and we look forward to hearing some feedback from you and questions from you and how we can make sure this program, one, gets to the businesses and gets to those individuals that are truly struggling, and ultimately support those groups that, well, we need them to carry through in a really challenging time. So with that, I'll maybe pass it over to Dan and look forward to answering your questions after Dan speaks.
So I'll be very brief in my comments. There's an important point that Derek made that I just want to reiterate here. One of the neat things about this group that's been meeting is it's not just supporting existing and old-time businesses. They're very important, there's no question about that, but also the newer businesses, the ones that are going to help Moorhead grow into what it's going to be. So these include the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the inventors, the tinkerers. I may be getting a little dramatic there, but I think it's really important to think about where we're going rather than remembering where we were in February 2020. Those days are gone. So I like this group has been looking and kind of watching the horizon. The second piece here is the importance of public comment and community feedback on this. So after this discussion tonight, first thing tomorrow morning, we'll be going out on this engagement piece for a week. And it's a pretty robust strategy that we have. Lisa kind of laid it out. And so trying something kind of new there that, I shouldn't say new, but really pushing it out to hear from folks. And then we'll be able to pull that all together for the next part of this conversation in 2 weeks. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for Thank you, everyone, for the update. Does the presentation from Ms. Bodie, Mr. Molly, and Mr. LaPointe bring up any questions? I do see a hand. Councilmember Lendas.
I guess first, just Director Bodie, I really appreciated how you laid out how expenses are going to be allocated, and also the idea of getting out public feedback. Mr. LaPointe, I really like the focus that you have on the breadth, but also on the nonprofits and small businesses. So I guess my biggest question is, the CARES Act is also funding the county, and what kind of coordination are we doing with the county and other agencies where there's significant overlap in our mission and purpose, both businesses but also city and resident, I guess, services?
I'll take that one, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that question, council member. So significant communication with the county. Obviously, once I knew there was funds coming into the local government as well as the county, the biggest feedback that I've had from businesses is the amount of programs and resources that have been out there and the confusion that creates. Many businesses didn't apply for resources that they may have been deemed eligible to apply for, but because of the acronym sounding similar to something that they got rejected for in the past, that confusion really created some hindrance to our business community, and that's locally, but that's statewide and nationwide, quite frankly. So significant communication with the county right away to see, one, are they interested in doing a program similar to what we're talking about, a grant program. And again, we're not reaching because we're really kind of ripping off from the state in a sense, and then kind of mimicking it to our kind of local needs. And so far, we've had really good conversations. I would say the one thing, and I think it's fair for the county to think this way, is they have other communities to think about, right? Not just Moorhead. They wanted to make sure it was fair and equitable. So if we created a program and we had a number that's set aside for the grant dollars, specifically the grants that businesses could get, that number could be carried over to the other communities across the county. So that was one thing that they really felt strongly about. And the other thing that we talked about was the admin of this program. We talk about timeline of spending the funds, but ultimately getting this application out to folks, marketing it, making sure it gets out to as many businesses as we possibly can, but potentially having to review hundreds of applications in a very short timeline, and knowing that there's other communities across the county that may not be able to even do that at a local level. So a lot of coordination about having maybe a unified program of sorts, and kind of working together to review applications, because the big thing is ultimately getting the money into businesses' hands and not giving money back to the state. I mean, that is the number one goal out of this whole thing, is making sure this money gets distributed to the community. And I know I've said it to the county that I'm there to support them any way we can to make sure that happens. We've also been leaning heavily on, obviously, the state, but also our partners at West Central Initiative. So West Central Initiative's been the ones that have been administering these grants and loans for many of the programs that are out there. They don't have the capacity to administer a program that we're talking about right now, but ultimately the guidance that they've learned through these mass amounts of applications that have came in and distributions of funds, we're learning from them to make sure that this could be a smooth process for everybody. Hopefully that answers your question.
More than answers it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindos. We'll pass it on to Councilmember White.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned that we will be doing setting aside some funds specifically towards women, minority-owned, and veteran-owned businesses, and I just wondered what outreach we're doing to make sure that we get the word out to those folks that might be eligible, and so to encourage them to apply.
Yeah, thank you, council member. It's a really good question. It's probably going to be, once we get live with a program that the council here supports, outreach is going to be first and foremost in how we go about things. Certainly, I think Moorhead is, I will say with pride that Moorhead has done a very good job of connecting with a lot of different community organizations to spread the word. So certainly partnering with Moorhead Business Association, some of the other community organizations that are out there, United Way. I think this can go far more reaching than just our kind of back door of Moorhead. This is going to be a push that we spread across this region. Ultimately, the funds will stay in Moorhead, right? But we're going to have to dig deep to really spread the word on this one. And again, don't have a ton of time on it, but I'm confident that the partnerships that we've gained and the trust that we've built with so many of these organizations and the ease that we're trying to go about with this application process, I think is really going to be beneficial to get a lot of applicants and ultimately get those that are truly struggling to apply for the funds and get them money.
Thank you, Councilmember White. We'll move on to Councilmember Hendrickson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Derek, I have a quick question for you. With the small business and community nonprofits support with $2 million, is the PPP involved? Is that incorporated in that, or is the PPP still separate, the Payment Protection Plan?
Yeah, so this is completely separate funding. So the $2 million that's set aside here is specifically pulled out from the federal CARES dollars that the Moorhead community received. So that's the money that we're looking at. Obviously, we don't have the exact data. It's been really hard to get federal or state specific data, I'll say directly for Moorhead, to figure out who's taking advantage of what. And this is a little off topic, but I think it's important noting that some communities have looked at loans or doing something with forgivable loans or just running a loan program altogether. The challenge is that we're finding through many of our Moorhead businesses is they don't want to take out another loan. They're maxed, they're stretched as thin as they can. They can't take out that much more credit to be able to kind of keep surviving. These grants are extremely important. Some of them have taken advantage of PPP, but again, we felt that the grant, really the only disqualifier that we have on here is if they've received the state grant, this economic development relief grant, which they'll be making announcements of specific individual businesses here over the next week or so. That's the only ones that we've looked to disqualify because it's actual direct funding to those businesses.
Okay, and with those grants, Derek, you know, it's up to $10,000 is for businesses under 20 and $3,000 for sole proprietors. Is there specific needs that they can spend that on, or is it up to them?
No, there are specific needs. We didn't really kind of get into that. I didn't know how much we wanted to, but there's very specific language within the federal guidelines on how they can. I'll just be quick with it. Basically, must be used for expenses incurred as a direct result of COVID-19 and could include working capital to support payroll expenses, rent, mortgage, utilities, business licenses, and other similar expenses that have occurred since March 1st, 2020. So hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilmember Hendrickson. We've got two other hands up, Councilmember Seljevold and then Councilmember Watson-Curry. Councilmember Seljevold?
Sorry, I gotta get that mute off. Yep, sorry.
That's okay.
I guess I don't understand the logic behind forfeiting money to the county. But if you forfeit money to the county and you're in the county, somehow can that be worked to your advantage to get the money back, maybe in a bigger pool?
They'll only have another 45 days to spend it. So it's not a city rule, it's a state, it's actually a state state rule that they put in place when they gave the pool to us. And then the hard deadline from the feds is the 30th of December. So we'll work with the county, and we're all really working hard. And the money has to be obligated, not necessarily out the door. So we have a number of projects that, you know, we will get under obligation by that time. So I think with everybody working together, we will accomplish it. So we don't want to forfeit a dollar.
And I'll maybe add too, from the business side of things, that was my exact thinking, is how do we make sure that this stretches the farthest? Because we know 2 million, it sounds like a lot of money, but we're taking our best guess at how many applicants we think we may receive based on other data that we have from employment numbers. So we knew that if the county was, you know, debating doing some type of business relief, if they could just designate some funds that would support our overall project and program mission, and ultimately be able to share that kind of wealth too through the other counties, then we have that money circulating throughout our regional economy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Soldier-Fold. Councilmember Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to go too far in the weeds on this, but as far as stretching our dollars, is there any possibility, if we know the general idea of what some of these businesses are going to spend their funds on, is there a way we can purchase things in bulk? I'm thinking like, an example that comes to mind is a bathroom. So if we buy door kicks or, you know, things to help businesses go hands-free, I don't know if that's a possibility, so just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good comment. You know, we've seen, I'll just note that there's been a couple counties across the state that I've noticed that have purchased PPE for businesses. I haven't specifically heard many requests from businesses saying we need this, or we don't have access to it. I think the one thing I'll kind of say on your point, which I think is a really good one, and we struggled through this whole kind of what do we kind of do and how do we make it stretch the furthest, is we've seen a lot of businesses be able to accommodate those changes, you know, because they feel like it's important, maybe took that expense on, and there's others that maybe just can't afford it either. So how do you kind of balance out the ones that have made that a priority to do it? You know, do you reimburse them? It's a really fine line to kind of struggle with some of the regulations that are laid out with this, well, the qualified expenses, quite frankly.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson Curry. Councilmember Hendrickson, is that an old hand or a new hand that's up? Just want to make sure. All right.
That's an old hand, sorry, Mayor.
No worries, just making sure. Are there any other questions or comments for the team? Oh,
Can I just add one more thing too? And I know there might be some questions about the 20 employees or less. I'll just say too, with the DEEDS grant program that they just launched, you know, I mentioned 30,000 applicants. 70% of those applicants were employers or businesses with 6 or fewer employees. So you're seeing a significant amount of businesses that are truly small, and small business can be defined in many different ways. But that's why we looked at that 20 or fewer, because we really wanted to focus on kind of the trends that we're seeing across the state of who's actually applying for these funds and who needs the funds.
and thank you to the team for putting this together. I know there's a lot of work in a quick time frame, but you know, we really appreciate your due diligence in putting us together. Also, kudos for working together with the county to make sure that all of our businesses and our residents are getting served. So thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other comments, folks, before we move on? All right, thanks, everyone. We'll move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes, 6A, meeting minutes from July 13th, 2020. Any additions, corrections, modifications to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
So moved. Carlson.
Second, Lindos.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand, sorry, she's not even here, White,
Yes.
Seljavold,
Aye.
Hendrickson,
Aye.
Lindos.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 7, citizens addressing the council. Madam City Clerk, Acting City Manager Molly, any requests from citizens writing electronically, phone?
None at this time, Mayor.
Okay,
None at this time.
all right, thank you both. That brings us to item number 11, Northwest Minnesota Emergency Management Mutual Aid Agreement. This was taken off consent. I'll hand it over to Councilmember Dahlquist.
Thank you, Mayor. I just thought we should take a look at this, being it is a new agreement, and I did get a chance to speak with Chief Dyson and Mr. Chad Stanglin about the concerns I had, and after speaking with them, I find this a very advantageous agreement, and if Mr. Stanglin could just give the high points of what the advantages are on this new agreement, just quickly, just so it's on the record, and then so everyone can know why we're doing this, and just for information purposes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor, or Mr. Mayor, and Councilmember and Councilmember Dahlquist. Yeah, so the agreement in front of you is to enter into a mutual aid agreement with Northwest. There's 14 counties in Northwest Minnesota, everything from Clay County all the way up to the Canadian border and Lake of the Woods. And those emergency managers have had a long-term mutual aid agreement to where if they need resources, a collaborative effort for planning purposes, for grant purposes, they've entered into this agreement so that way they could share those resources in the time of need. And so recently, as more local emergency managers came online and received additional training parallel to the directors that manage those emergency management programs within those counties, they provided an opportunity for local emergency managers to take to enter into the same agreement, knowing that they can bring some value for additional training and input into the region. And so recently, back in April, Crookston just moved forward. Their fire chief serves as their emergency management director, entered into this agreement, and then obviously we've had events that kind of my intention was to move it forward, and then we had COVID kind of take over practices and that type of stuff. So the intention here is to move this forward and see if we enter into this agreement, so that way we can share those emergency management. So for the city of Moorhead, I serve as the emergency management director, really is in support of our chiefs, our public safety people, our community, make sure we have plans in place, we're prepared for all hazards, all the type of events that can occur. And so with that, we look at grant opportunities to be able to offset that. One big advantage of this is those funding opportunities that can be out there. So the first thing that happens during a disaster and you call in additional resources is FEMA looks at, did you already have a pre-mutual aid agreement with those resources as you pull in? So that way, if you do, then those expenses can be eligible. In this agreement, we would basically be washed out of 8 hours for that commitment of time, but beyond that, then it would be eligible for that other for reimbursement from the federal government. So that's one of the biggest advantages of this, and then along with that is opportunities to work collaboratively with our regional emergency managers, so that way, as we share plans, as we prepare, that we're doing it as a regional, because there's a lot of impacts that happen in one jurisdiction that might impact the region as a whole, and it just provides a better opportunity.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Stangelin. Does that answer any questions you have, Councilmember Dahlquist, or any further comments?
No, I'm happy with the explanation, and I think this is good for the city to have the quicker access to funds for reimbursements, and I'm really happy that all my concerns were answered, and thank you so much for just giving us that info.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from council members? Okay, Councilmember White.
Thank you, Mayor. I think just, I appreciated the material. It noted that, this is something that if we did decide that that this wasn't in our interest, that parties can leave it. You have to give notice. I think it's 3 months notice to the different members of it. I don't think this was noted in there. You mentioned Crookston, Mr. Stangelin, and I think isn't East Grand Forks, so we would be there. It's mostly counties, but there are a couple of other cities that are part of this agreement as well, right? But I agree, it sounds like, I think this is beneficial for Moorhead.
Yeah, that is correct. Thank you for bringing that up. Crookston, it takes about a 3-year time frame for emergency management director to get through all the training. And that is a requirement of this agreement, is that you have to meet the same training requirements parallel to the directors of those counties. And so their fire chief in East Grand Forks just retired. And so they'd be in a spot where they would have to wait until another emergency manager comes up. And so that's part of the leaving and agreements that come along with. It's pretty particular to the individual, because if you have events, you're calling in that resource, you got to be trained to be able to perform that task.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember, oops, sorry, mask on. Councilmember Carlson. Or no hand?
What was that?
Your hand was up. I wasn't sure if you wanted to be heard on that, on this topic.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I must have not unmuted myself quickly. I moved to approve the mutual aid agreement.
Motion made by Councilmember Carlson. Is there a second?
Lindos,
I
second.
second.
You got it, Madam City Clerk?
Yep.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk.
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Lindos,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Aye.
Salgevold.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Stangelin, for being with us this evening, and thank you for the information.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, folks. That brings us to item number 12, which is a resolution to approve public art, downtown benches, and traffic signal boxes. I'm assuming, Mr. Molly, this is yours?
Actually, we have Miss Planner Kim Satrowski on the line, and I will turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Molly and Mayor Judd and council. I'm excited to bring the item in front of you today. Use works of art located in public places. I feel that this project fits within the identity initiative of the 2018 strategic plan. It will strengthen connections and create places where people want to gather. So these works of art, we worked in partnership with Grady Carlson, the art teacher at Moorhead High, to solicit high school students to create art for our downtown benches. And so these works of art were due the day before spring break. So it was the last day of in-class school that the kids turned these in. So it's been kind of an adventure to finish this project up. Once we finally did get the artwork we followed the 2018 public art policy, which includes having the art review team, which is a mix of Art and Culture Commission members and city staff, to look at the projects in a technical nature. And then they reviewed and make a recommendation to the Art and Culture Commission, which made this recommendation to you. And I would like to thank you, Commissioner Seljevold, for seeing the whole project through. He served on the art review team, Art and Culture Commission, and is part of this review. The locations are in your packet, starting on page 72. I'm still working on getting waivers from all of the students to allow us to use the works of art on our promotional materials and for the application. So we're looking for an approval of the artwork, but some of the locations are still unknown. So if I can't get a signature, we might reuse one of the other works of art that's approved in a different location. Any other questions?
Thank you, Ms. Sochowski, for your work on this. For the update, I see Councilmember Carlson and Councilmember White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank you for the whole committee for doing this. I think the artwork is absolutely incredible. I personally know 3 of our Moorhead resident artists, so I want to give them a public shout out, which is Taylor Melton, Stella Erickson, and Kate Stafford. The incredible artists that we are growing here in Moorhead is absolutely astounding, and I know that Mr. Carlson is a very well-liked and innovative and inspirational teacher at Moorhead High School. So thank you for doing this and really showcasing our young artists.
Thank you, Councilmember Carlson. Councilmember White, and then Councilmember Lindos.
I agree wholeheartedly. What a wonderful project, and it's great to see this fantastic art by some of our local students. And I have a request, and that is, if possible, could we do an event to celebrate this? And what I was wondering is if we had since these are outdoor, installations, that we could do something that would be COVID friendly. Perhaps having a day where we are unveiling all of them and have the artists buy their, their piece, and we could do a walking tour and have people go, and they could go and meet the artists and from a safe distance and celebrate their talent and their contributions to Moorhead.
Thank
I
you,
think that's a great idea.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sochowski, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Sorry.
I just said that sounds like a great idea, and we'll see what we can do.
Great, thank you. Then we'll go to Councilmember Lindos.
I love that idea, Councilmember White, and I wholeheartedly support what Councilmember Carlson and White just said. And if you're going to do something COVID friendly, I'll buy the artists Tasty Freeze treats. Okay, so just let me know. So I was just going to reiterate and totally synergistically tack on to what Council Members Carlson and White were saying. I just got back from a little trip, and I have to say that the communities, small communities that I would stop in, the things that always impress me is when they actually had artwork. And sometimes you don't know what you're missing until you don't see it someplace else. And so I'm really excited for even more artwork in Moorhead. So I can't wait till the unveiling. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have hands up from council members White and Carlson, of those old or new hands.
Mr. Mayor, mine's new.
All right, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along the lines of what Councilmember White said, perhaps these artists could, I know that the 3 that I know, I don't know if all of them, but the 3 that I know were graduating seniors at Moorhead High School, so perhaps we could get a picture of them along with their artwork, and at least initially get them all put on Facebook to give a shout out to those artists and so that they could be acknowledged that way too. And then secondly, I was just going to move to approve the public art.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. You got the names, Madam City Clerk, okay? Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk.
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Aye.
Seldervold,
Aye.
Lindas.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thanks, folks. All right, then we move on to item number 15, legislative update. I'm assuming that's
Ms. Bodie.
Bodie.
Thanks for hanging on, Lisa. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Well, yes, I'm here for another installment of the never-ending story of the 2020 legislature. So, and I won't go back over everything. We previously discussed Moorhead's legislative agenda items, but in my last report, we were holding on to hope that there would still be a capital investment / bonding bill in 2020. And to refresh our audience that the requests that were on Moorhead's bonding priority list included the Clay County Resource Recovery Facility, the 11th Street Underpass, continued flood mitigation, and the Community and Aquatic Center. So about 10 days ago, Governor Walz reported that we were on the 5-yard line, but we didn't cross those last 5 yards during the second special session that ended on July 20th. So if I continue the sports metaphor, now the ball is being moved. There are talks of a third special session in August. However, chances of a bonding bill in that session are considered not impossible, but difficult. House Speaker Melissa Hortman indicated, she described the outlook as for bonding to occur in August would be murky. And the timing is an issue on a couple of fronts. One of which is that it's that much closer to the general election, and that's speculation as to how that affects the bonding bill. But also, coming at the same time, the state is selling bonds from previous legislative authorizations. Governor Walz says that bond buyers don't favor a state making significant changes to its finances in the middle of a bond sale. So it's something that he considered that a lot of us can relate to is comparing it to the potential of home buyers not doing anything with any additional financing or major financial changes while a mortgage application is pending. I think a lot of us can understand or relate to that. So this means the next opportunity, if that is the case, if that makes it impossible, the next opportunity for the Minnesota legislature to make any changes to the budget, including a bonding bill, would have to wait until late September when that blackout period ends. So that's the latest information on bonding. And, of course, as always, stay tuned. We'll keep you updated as new information becomes available. I will also note that when as it relates to the 11th Street project, Mayor Judd, Bob Zimmerman, and I, along with our partners at MnDOT and the Great Northern Corridor Coalition, have been making calls, virtual calls on our federal legislative delegation, and pitching the project for which we have a $25 million build grant. So we're just going to keep pressing on all fronts on all the projects that we have available, and hopefully we'll wear them down and everybody will say yes to us, and we'll get some construction going, which really will help to stimulate the local economy and help our construction industry, as well as make great transportation improvements for our city. So with that, I could try to answer any questions you might have, or we can move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Bodie, for the update and the report Also, just so council staff and the residents are aware, city staff has put in a lot of work on the presentation to our state, federal partners, and we feel like we've got a really good story to tell. And so hopefully this is something that will be successful as we move forward with the bill grant process. Hoping to hear something again within the next couple months here about where we're at with that. But obviously, not having the bonding bill finalized is going to be a big hurdle in this effort. So again, I do appreciate the amount of time that Ms. Bodie and the staff, Dr. Zimmerman, have put into this project. So any questions or comments for Ms. Bodie? All right, hearing none, thank you again for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. All right, folks, that gets us to item number 16, mayor and council reports. Council have any reports they'd like to make on for the good of the order? Councilmember Carlson, then White, then Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to give a quick update from the Public Outreach Committee of the FM diversion. If citizens go to fmdiversion.gov, on the page that pops up, you will see two drone footages of two of the control structures that are currently being built. One is the diversion inlet and control structure. The other is a wild rice river controlled structure. The first one actually, I believe today, was going to begin a concrete pour. So work has been progressing on the North Dakota side with both of these inlet structures, and I think the drone footage provides some really unique perspectives of all the work that is currently being done. Also, it's important to note that we have a number of Moorhead residents that actually participate and are being employed by this diversion along with several local businesses. So that is one of the things that the Outreach Committee wanted to get out to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson Curry. I'm sorry, Carlson. Sorry, I'm looking at my hands and trying to multitask here for the update. Then that goes to Councilmember White.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to bring to the council's attention two things that were discussed at our last Human Rights Commission meeting. One was the opening that we have for Ward 4, and just in general, the makeup of our Human Rights Commission. For those that aren't aware, this is, I believe, the only board or commission that actually allows someone who is under 18 to serve on the board or commission. So it's actually written specifically in terms of the makeup for the committee. We don't currently have somebody who is a minor, and so just something to keep in mind if you are looking either for this vacancy or in the future, that it was something that the commission was interested in having a voice of younger residents within our community. The other thing that I'll mention, because it will be probably coming forward, is that at our next meeting, we're going to be discussing whether to put together a resolution to request that Juneteenth be recognized as a holiday in Moorhead, as much as we did for Indigenous Peoples Day. And so we're hoping to have Ms. Destiny Holliday come in and talk to us about that. And I wanted to let the council know that in case if you had any questions that you'd like us to bring up at that meeting, but expect that we were planning to bring a resolution forward to the council after we have our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember White, for that update. Councilmember Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No updates on any committees, but I did want to share that there is a deadline of July 31st for applications for the pandemic EBT or SNAP benefits that's specifically targeting families with children who receive free and reduced school lunch. So if you simply Google PEBT Minnesota, you'll find the link, which is in the Department of Human Services. Apparently in Moorhead, our numbers of applications are lower based on the data that's been collected. So just wanted to encourage anyone who works with families to pass along that information, the PEBT, Pandemic EBT benefit. And I have a feeling that Mr. Dan Molly will share this, but if you happen to have $5 burning a hole in your pocket, you can reach out to our city clerk, as filing for city council seats opens tomorrow and runs until August 11th. And I also wanted to just point out that also opening tomorrow is the Moorhead Public School Board, which is a cost savings. It's only $2 to file for school board. So just wanted to raise awareness for those openings and opportunities, and that's all I have to share. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson Curry. Councilmember Lindos, then Councilmember Hendrickson.
Thank you, Mayor Judd, and thank you, Councilmember Watson Curry, for your announcements. That was one of the ones I was going to also do. So I have one a further announcement is the Riverview Community Garden meets Wednesdays from 2 to 4 p.m. They still have space if people want to actually participate in that community garden. That's right by the Moorhead Public Housing. It's a great little garden producing lots of produce. And if you just want to come out and volunteer to pick weeds and find potato bugs, beetles, both the Riverview Community Garden from 2 to 4 and also on Wednesday, the Grateful Community Garden down at the Presbyterian Church is from 6 to 8. And both those you can easily volunteer and meet and get your hands dirty, which makes you feel good, like you're making something. So that was the only announcement. And then I just wanted to do a shout out. It's on the consent agenda, but just following up with what makes communities cool and really fun is art and trails and parks. And we have both acting city manager Mr. Molly and assistant city planner Steinhoff, who have put a grant together to hopefully get more river trail, and that would be fantastic. So I can't wait to have more trails in Moorhead. That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindos. Councilmember Hendrickson, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to, since Councilmember Carlson mentioned the outreach, I did attend the FM Diversion Finance meeting last Wednesday. Just a little news, Bernie Dardis has been voted as chair, Mayor Bernie Dardis out of West Fargo, replacing Tony Greenberg. So he will now take that on from now on for the rest of the year, and I'm sure following him. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember White, I see your hand up, and Councilmember Carlson. We'll go Councilmember White, then Carlson.
I'll quickly just add one thing that Councilmember Lindos reminded me of. Usually we have a Red River Run, and last year it was part of Greater Moorhead Days. And because of COVID, it won't happen in the same fashion. I happen to be involved with the group that organizes that, but what we will be doing still in September is we'll have a free event to where people can go out and run a course in Moorhead to celebrate the our beautiful trails along the Red River, and they can post it on Facebook, and we'll be giving prizes away. This is the Lake Agassiz Pacers, but just a chance to really get out there and enjoy some of our trails along the Red River. So we'll be doing it in a little different fashion this year, but there will be a run along the Red River this fall.
Okay, thank you for that. Councilmember Carlson, your hand is now down. Did you still wish to be heard, or are you good? I can't hear you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Just briefly, for myself, I think the last week and a half has been pretty much working on the build grant lobbying. So special shout out to the North Dakota federal legislators that we were able to meet with there. their teams regarding the underpass, also to the Minnesota contingent. They meet with both of our senators, Smith, Klobuchar, as well as Congressman Peterson regarding our efforts. They're very supportive of those efforts as well. And I think other than that, MetroCog meeting last week, there was a approval and I believe open for public comment on the Transportation Improvement Program. 2 projects specific. There's a number, but I think those that are quick of interest are the 34th Street intersection with Highway 10, as well as Old 52 Main Avenue Southeast. So I think that one's slated for 2022, and I believe the 34th Street was, 2024, I believe. But other than that, I don't think I have any other things to report, but I do want to send a shout out to Grady Carlson, the art teacher at Moorhead Senior High School, for inspiring our younger generation for a love and passion of art. He does great work, and I think for those of you who know him well, he's an asset to this community. For those of you who don't, Mr. Carlson truly is becoming well known for his efforts in the state of Minnesota and throughout the region. So special shout out to him and the 3 recipients that will have their art placed throughout the city. With that, I will pass it over to Acting City Manager Dan Molly.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I just want to say thank you to all of you for all your support and encouragement in this acting city manager role. It's just, I really appreciate it. It's just a delight to have this opportunity to work here in Moorhead at this time. Such a challenging time, and a time that presents so many opportunities, frankly. Councilmember Watson Curry did mention tomorrow, which is an exciting time, in that the affidavits for candidacy are opening up for the city council. The filing period is July 28th to August 11th. A filing fee is $5. You submit an affidavit of candidacy. It's very simple. And if you're interested in more information, you can call our city clerk, Christina Rust, at 299-5304 or email. And I get the easy part of just talking about it. Christina Rust is right here and is actually doing all the work. I don't know, is there anything you'd like to add to that, Christina?
There isn't. The only change this time is normally people can just bring them in and drop those off. We do ask that you just call and set up an appointment for a time where I can meet to get it.
So, yep, with that, there's also, I have to say, there's so many incredible things that happen throughout the city, whether it be forestry or putting out fires at compost sites or picking up garbage, making sure the water works, plowing. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, all the things that we get into, safe routes to schools and all that kind of stuff, bike paths and roads. But we have a very special a very special intern, Gabrielle Lomel, who has been working. She just on her own found Steve Moore, and they've been translating information and putting it up on our website. So now we have information on recycling and solid waste translated into 4 different languages on our website, and they're really excited for their next project. And I think that when something special happens, it deserves to be lifted. So that just happened, and thank you, Gabrielle, and all the other people out there that do little things that mean so much to others, especially when they encourage support and communication of each other. And so with that, I just want to thank and recognize all the efforts of folks in Moorhead for everything that they're doing to comply with the governor's orders to wear masks and helping to keep the peace out there. So I just think that, this is a stressful time, and the more we can be there to help support each other, make these times a little easier, the better. So especially when we have our local law enforcement that seems to find its way into the middle of this stuff. It could be happening on a bus. There's any numbers of points of conflict or cooperation. So I just admire it when it's cooperation. It makes it easier for all of us. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molly, for the update and for your work as well.
Thank
All right, folks, that brings us over to item number 18, no executive sessions this evening. Any new business? Item number 19? Hearing none. Number 20, any citizens that wish to address the council, any communications that have came in during the meeting?
None at this time.
Okay. None? Okay. And I believe that will lead us to adjourn, but I don't have item number 21, so I'm assuming that's number 21. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Watson Curry.
So moved. Okay, second.
All right, you got it, Madam City Clerk?
Yep.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Good night, Moorhead.